Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Nolan Lewis of Kryptos to talk about Force of Danger, out right now on AFM Records. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm busy with a lot of work and stuff, but it's another day as usual.
Well, it's exciting times. New record is out. People are listening to it. What's been the feedback so far?
It's been mostly positive. I was actually quite surprised with how positive it's been, considering we kind of really went really old school on this record. I think you also mentioned it in your review of the album. Some people have said the production's a bit rough and it's a bit harsh, I would say. But once you get past that, you really get where we are coming from. And I think a lot of people are slowly understanding that we really have our roots in that whole NW BHM scene, and the early 80s Priest records and Accept records and stuff like that. So and especially after our album kind of premiered on the YouTube channel New Wave of Traditional Heavy Metal full albums, that's pretty much where our audience is, because that's the kind of crowd that gets our music. And after it premiered over there, it's been getting a ton of good responses since then. And we seem to be generating a lot of media coverage as well this time. This is really cool.
Well, to speak to what you just said about the production, I felt that the production is rough, but it matches the style and the sound that you guys going for the record. So if the album sounded polished and clean and modern, then it would defeat the whole purpose of the record that you guys are trying to put together. I think you have to kind of see the forest from the trees here.
Exactly. And that's something which you hit the nail on the head when you review the album. It's like it's got to sound the way it's supposed to. Certain music is just supposed to sound a certain way.
Exactly.
That's just how it is. You can't really put Meshuggah production on our music. It sounds ridiculous. And you can't you can't do Dream Wife.
100%. It just doesn't work. It's not what it's meant to be.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing with what a lot of people don't seem to understand. There are a lot of old school bands, especially from the 80s as well, who they went more by feeling and emotion rather than production value. Sometimes you need that kind of garage sound, where everything's just spontaneous and everything's just fuck all this shit, let's just play and let's kick ass. Instead of thinking about oh man, I think we should make it sound this way because that guy like us or this guy like us. No, just go in there and do it.
Yeah, it has to have that raw sound, that raw feel that almost just feels like a jam session. That exactly. Pure rock and roll sound.
Yeah, and that's the kind of band we are. We aren't the kind of band who meticulously sits and plans things and twists knobs here and there and put all these fancy studios stickery into our music and stuff. It's mostly what we record in the studio on the fly, and it's just touched up a bit during the mixing and mastering phase, because we kind of want it that way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, everything just sounds too pristine, too clean, too polished, and it takes all the edge away from our music.
I agree with you 100%. And speaking of this record and the music that you created and the production and everything, how was the creative process behind this album? Did you guys approach this record from a creative perspective differently from previous albums?
Not really, but this time around we didn't have as much time because of the pandemic and all the lockdowns and stuff. We didn't have as much time to really maybe think the album completely through. But at the same time, because we were under so much pressure, we wrote and recorded the entire album over a 3-month span. So it was really quick, but we were so in the zone that it kind of didn't matter that we didn't have so much time on our hands. Because with previous albums, we had the luxury of, an entire year or a year and a half to write and record everything. But this time around, because in our city, because of the pandemic, things are very haphazard. And luckily, between January and April, we had the lockdown restrictions were lifted, and we had some time to get into the studio and write and demo and all that stuff. So, but once we did that, we were like so in the zone that we just started knocking songs out one after the other, and it didn't really feel like oh man, we did this really quickly. It was just natural. It just came naturally to us.
So was the pandemic the biggest challenge for you guys when putting this record together?
Yeah, it definitely was, because India was really hit hard by the second wave. Uh, our healthcare systems completely collapsed, and it was really bad over here. And during all that, with all that going on and stuff, it kind of course, because of the pandemic, our 2020 tour had to be postponed to 2021, and our 2021 tour was postponed to 2022. So it kind of uh, killed all the momentum that we built in 2019 when we went on tour and to support our previous album. So we had to get this album out to keep interest going. It was necessary. I think if we hadn't done this album, by next year we'd probably have to start from scratch. People would
Yeah,
have
yeah.
probably forgotten a lot about us, and we'd have to kind of do everything all over again. So it's really important that we got this out. And despite the pandemic, despite all the difficulties, because in India everything's really weird. Even though you don't get advance warning for anything, it's just okay. Today you're at home. Today you can go out. Today you're stuck. Today it's all on the fly. So you have to really work around all these things. And but yeah, somehow we pulled it off. We had to manage with the night curfews and the cops and patrolling the streets and all that stuff. But yeah, it
Wow.
worked.
You mentioned the pandemic as a huge challenge for this record. You mentioned how things are hectic in India. Being a band from India, does this add extra layers of difficulty when it comes to exposing your music to the world, or you feel now we live in a place that everybody's connected through the internet and things are a little bit easier? Some doors are much easier for you to open these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology has made things a lot easier. So, in this day and age, no matter where you're from, you can get your music out there. I mean, when we started the band, it was around 1998 or something. There was no internet back then in India. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have anything. All that stuff came in only somewhere in the mid 2000s. So we had a really tough time getting our music out back then. Even in 2004, when we released our first album, it was really hard to, get our music anywhere. Maybe even locally, it was pretty tough, because you had to do it through word of mouth and hand out flyers, and the really old school way of doing things. Or you call up some guy on the phone and hope he's at home and like, dude, we released the album, you want to buy it? So yeah, I mean, technology has really helped us a lot for sure, as it should any band, in this day and age. And the cool thing about the internet is, we get to talk to a lot of people that we would have never otherwise had a chance to interact with. I mean, people write into us from all over the world, which is quite amazing. I mean, and from places we would never expect. I mean, recently somebody contacted us from the Faroe Islands. Somebody contacted us from Madagascar. I was like, whoa, I didn't even know if you guys even heard of us over there. It's like pretty awesome.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Going back into the record, I really felt like this album was very balanced. But I want to ask you, do you feel the balance that the record has comes from the structure that you put together, or does it come from the soundscape that the album has? Or maybe both?
It's a bit of both, actually. We kind of, if you notice, we kind of follow this very Judas Priest formula. It's kind of like, from Scream for Vengeance or Defenders of the Faith or Painkiller. You start with a really fast song, you get down to the mid-paced songs, then there's another fast one, and then there's a slow one, and it kind of goes. It's like peaks and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of keeps things interesting throughout. Because if we threw all the fast songs in right at the start, then it kind of just tapers down.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like a roller coaster just coming to an end abruptly. So we kind of do the whole peaks and valleys thing, which keeps the listener guessing as well. 1 minute there's a fast song, he's probably expecting a fast song, but there's a anthemic one coming up right after that, or maybe an epic one after that. So we kind of like it that way. It's also the way I made it used to do the early albums like Peace of Mind and stuff. It was they charge out of the blocks with like the Eagles there, and then suddenly there's Revelations, which is slow, and then it picks up with Die With Your Boots On and things like that. So we are big fans of that kind of movement within an album. You know, it kind of showcases all our strengths, but you know, nothing's too top heavy or bottom heavy. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
spread out. Yeah.
And that's where the balance I felt it came in. It's not like the album is flat all around. You do have those peaks and valleys, but I didn't feel like the peaks were so high and the valleys were so low that really makes the record feel disconnected. No, the whole album really feels as one. It feels like it has a
Right.
little bit of a life of its own.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I guess it's just the songs, you know, the songs came together so quickly, and they came together one after the other. So, you know, they all have, they all kind of, in a way, you know, I could put it, they all come from the same family, family tree. They're like, it's like different branches on the same tree, one a little high, one a little low, and things like that. So that's kind of why, you know, you get this vibe of it being a very unified, together sounding album. You know, it's there's nothing that stands out as, oh shit, you know, this shouldn't really be on there because it sounds so different or anything like that. And that was also a conscious effort. You know, we always like to make our albums as consistent as possible in sound, in vibe, in, you know, in style, everything. Because even if you listen to our previous albums, there's a consistency within the albums, which is something that we greatly admire about a lot of the older bands. You know, and like you take a band like AC/DC, their consistency is phenomenal. You know, the
Yeah.
album to album to album. Yeah. So, you know, we really try and achieve that kind of consistency in our sound as well.
You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation the production and how some people get it and how some people don't. And I want to talk a little bit about the guitars in that production. Did you guys approach the guitar sound or what do you wanted out of the guitar slightly different on this record? Or is this album a continuation of everything that you've built up until this point?
You know, we kind of wanted a sharper guitar sound. We were going for something more focused, more direct. If you compare it to our previous album, the guitar tone on this album is more, I would say it's more razor sharp.
Yeah,
You know, it kind of cuts through everything.
cuts through it. Yeah.
Yeah, which is what we really wanted. We wanted the guitar to be really stand out, because I think some of the riffs and some of the solos are the best we've ever written so far. And those I mean, that's what should take the spotlight on this album. And that's exactly why you know, the guitar tone we went for, the way it was produced and everything, made the guitars really stand out. Because at the end of the day, my vocals are shit, so you need something to stand out.
Yeah, I think you're underselling yourself. Your vocals are fine. Like, but I see where you're coming from. You want people to come in for the guitars and then stay for your vocals.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's cool if people stay for my vocals. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to get into, because it doesn't. A lot of people have issues because it doesn't really match the music, because they're not used to hearing this kind of harsh, trashy vocals with this kind of melodic metal. You know,
I think it's perfect though.
yeah, it sounds fine to me, but you know,
Yeah,
a lot
I
of
think
people.
it's perfect. It goes with the whole production. It's unpolished. I think it's great. It's so grady.
Exactly. That's exactly that's exactly the outlook that we have, you know. But I get it when, you know, people say we kind of expected cleaner vocals, high pitched vocals with this kind of music. I get it, you know. Maybe if I wasn't in the band and I heard it, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, they need to ditch the singer or something.
You fire yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I love it. I love it. You know, you mentioned the solos. I really have to give you guys props. The solos on this record are outstanding. I mean, there's not one single solo that you're like, you know, that one was kind of okay, you know? No, every solo is outstanding. Not only outstanding in terms of the musicianship that you guys did on the solo, but how it fits the design and the sound of the song itself. How was it to work on those solos?
You know, we take great pride in structuring our solos. You know, our guitarist Rohit, he's a phenomenal talent. I mean, I get a really terrible complex when he's playing next to me, because I'm just playing like 3 chords and he's like shredding all those places. I'm like, fuck, man, I need to like shape up. So, but the thing is, if you like when you listen to Judas Priest records, the solos are literally songs on their own. They're so elaborate. They add so much to the song. They're literally like the highlight of the song. You take anything from maybe Screaming for Vengeance onwards, like the solo for the Hellion Electric Eye, or the solo for Freewheel Burning, or Jawbreaker, or you take even the turbo stuff. You take songs like Locked In or Reckless. The solos stand out. They always seem to put a lot of thought in their solos, and which is something that we want to do. We don't really. I notice a lot of bands, they kind of treat the solo as just something that needs to be done with, and let's carry on with the song.
Yeah. Like people are expecting a solo here right now. Let's just put something there.
Exactly. It's 20-30 seconds. Let's just play some stuff and throw it on the record and keep going.
Yeah.
But for us, we actually sit down, we construct it, right from scratch. Maybe this note sounds good. This note sounds good. Hey, how about those? Let's try this out. Let's try that out. Let's put a twinno on top of this. Let's put an arpeggio here, a sweep there, all that stuff. We really try and do our best to make the solo stand out. Like if you listen to the solo on Raging Steel, that's a super elaborate solo, or even Dawnbreakers. The ending solo was it's kind of like what Jake Healy used to do with Ozzy. This flurry of notes, and it elevates the song. We want the solos to elevate all our songs. That's because that's the icing on the cake. So yeah, we take a lot of pride. We put a lot of thought into our solos, and it's great when somebody talks about them, because I think Rohit's solos are some of the best around right now in this kind of metal.
I agree. I mean, this record, I was blown away. It's like you're listening to the album, it's like, wow, this solo is incredible. Then the next song, wow, this one is even better. And then the next one, wow, this one is even better than the previous. It seems like to keep getting better and better. It's not necessarily that the solos are better. It's just that they fit the song so well that makes the song better and makes the solo sound better. So it works both ways,
It's a give and take. At the end of the day, it's what can you do to you have a great riff, so what can you do with your solo that can push this riff, elevate this riff even more, and vice versa. What if when you end the solo and you go back to your riff, is the riff also complementing the solo that just got played? And that's kind of the way we look at things. We can't really have a solo and then a shitty riff after that and end the song, or vice versa. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Even though it sounds very simple, it's like 4-minute songs, a couple of riffs, a solo, a strict format, you could say. But putting all this stuff together takes, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. But at the same time, it's still very spontaneous. I don't know how exactly to explain it, but it's kind of like we think about it, but when we play it, it just falls into place. It's like, oh cool, you came up with that riff, you came up with this melody, put it together, bam, we got it. Let's keep going. Like that.
Wow. I know you mentioned your vocals and how proud you are of what you've done with them. So let me ask you this. Do you feel like when you come into an album, do you overthink it as far as the vocals go, or do you feel like you take more of a organic approach, and what feels right in the song, that's what you're going to go with?
I don't think at all, actually. Just go and do it. I mean, it's really weird, because when it comes to my vocals, I don't really have a set way of singing beforehand. I don't really think, okay, this goes here, this goes there, all that stuff. In fact, some of the lyrics were even written, days before I was supposed to get into the studio. So I kind of like to wing it. I don't like to prepare, because then you lose all spontaneity. At least that's what I think. When you really sit and you think about it, okay, I think this word should go right here and this sentence should go. I find it a lot better when I get into the studio, the music starts playing, and I can already hear it in my head. Like, okay, I need to say this right now. So I just go like blah, 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 blah. And if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't fit, try again, try it some other way. I think and for me that works best. I've tried it before where I've actually sat and thought about things and how to place the vocals and stuff, but it just doesn't work for me. I really need to get in there and just bark it out, and just have a sip of brandy in the studio and just like, yeah, man.
This is
That's
it.
pretty much what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, this is it. This is it. You said you only had you had a short time period because of the pandemic and all the difficulties to work on this record versus previous albums. Because of that time, that shortness of time, was there a song that perhaps you guys had to scrap altogether because it was just consuming too much of your time and you couldn't get it to where you wanted? And is there a song on the record that give you some gray hairs?
Not on the record, but we had a couple of songs that didn't make the record. We had one song which we just, I mean, it sounded great, but it just didn't fit the vibe of the album. It seemed a bit too thrashy, I would say. It was kind of like a band like Dark Angel decided to crash our party and like, hey man, we're going to take over your studio or something. So there were a couple of songs like that, where because we got so carried away with songs like Raging Steel and stuff with all the speed and energy and stuff. So we kind of like tried to write a couple of more songs in that vein, but they just weren't fitting in with how the entire album was shaping up. It was just a bit, it wasn't us basically. Sometimes you can tell when a riff isn't you. You play it and you're like, yeah, it sounds good, but is it really us? Is this melody you're playing, is it really us? I remember we wrote a couple of riffs that sounded way too happy. I was like, man, this sounds like Whitesnake. I think we'll all have to like get like poof up our hair and stuff.
Get rid of the leather jackets.
Yeah, it's like just turns out and suddenly you have makeup and.
That would have been very interesting, but that I think it would definitely not go with the vibe of the record.
Yeah, definitely, and not with my dashing good looks.
When you look back at the album of all the work that you guys put into this record, what do you think is the biggest strength that this album has to offer?
I think it's kind of like we target. I wouldn't say target. It's like the people who understand this music will get where we are coming from, and that's kind of what we want to do. This music is tailor-made for people who think the same as us, who grew up with the same music as us, who have the same thought process. We aren't really concerned with making like a shitload of fans who also listen to whatever music else is out there, but our music is very, you could say, narrow in that sense. We want to get those kind of people who have the same mindset as us on our side. It's also like people who swear by a lot of the NWO BHM bands and the movement, especially bands like Jaguar and Blitzkrieg and Diamond Head and Holocaust and all those great bands. They were so underrated and so underappreciated. And all the stuff that we come from the same mindset basically, and all the music that we do, there are bits and pieces of all these bands and that entire movement sprinkled in our music. Mm-hmm. And every time I even mention all these bands in interviews, I want people to discover the roots of where all this comes from. All the music that we play, even huge bands like Metallica still pay homage to those roots. They still talk about bands from that era, and they've even covered all those bands because those bands were defining bands for the music that we play today. But unfortunately, most people don't know about them. So that's kind of I would like our album to kind of open people's eyes to where it came from, if possible. It's more like we're not really that interested in selling 1 million records or becoming famous and stuff. I want this because this music means much more than that. It really is a way of life. It's and especially for us, it's part of our lives. So we'd like our music to kind of generate that feeling in other people.
Wow, really interesting. I have one last question for you, and that is, when you look at a record, I always feel like as an artist, there's a piece of you with every album that you create, and perhaps you discover a little new piece within you with every album that you put together. When you look back at this record, what has this album taught you about yourself as an artist that you perhaps didn't know you had it in you before?
Oh man, I'd say I think that's time management. Yeah, it really did, teaches that, I wouldn't say teaches, but it really opened our eyes to the fact that, when we really put our minds to it, it doesn't matter how much time we have, we can still crank it out, before the album, I mean, before we actually decided to write the album and record it, we were like, man, do we have enough time? Can we pull this off? We were like kind of doubting ourselves. But as we kept going, we're like, yeah, man, we can do this. And in fact, we can do this better than we do it usually, And that, for me, that was a real eye opener, because at one point we were, steeped in self-doubt, and next thing you know, we're like on top of the world. We're just cranking shit out, and we're like, yeah, man, let's go, keep going. And it was so awesome because we were so in the zone, we just, it was day after day after day after day. We didn't think of anything else. And we hadn't really experienced that before, because previously with our other albums, we had, days off and time to think and time to recuperate and all that stuff. But this was day one, bang, 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 for 3 months from start to finish. And I don't know how we pulled it off, but we did. Yeah,
so are you going to go back to this formula in the future?
Maybe we might force ourselves to do it. It's like, okay, we have a year to record the album, but you know what? Let's leave it to the last minute.
Put some pressure on yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of how it is. You crush a ball of coal and you get a diamond or something.
Yeah. Wow. Really well said. Really well said. Well, Nolan, thank you very much for your time today, man. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with me about the record. I'm a huge fan of you guys, as you know. So thank you for taking the time to come on the channel and talk about the record. Force of Danger, out right now, Kryptos on AFM Records. Take care.
Thanks so much, Pedro. Awesome talking to you. Thanks a lot.